Well, good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for logging in tonight or tuning in or signing in or however you're connecting with us this evening. I'm joining you from Illinois, where I'm still located at the time, and we'll talk to you a little bit about my novel, Opulence, Kansas, which came out this summer from your friends at Meadowlark Books, which is right there in Emporia. And it's the story about a Chicago to Kansas transplant written by another soon-to-be Chicago to Kansas transplant. So it's being sort of billed as a YA novel. The main character is a teenaged girl, but I've been hearing from people from a variety of age groups that they've found it enjoyable and interesting, and I hope you will too. The main character in Opulence is Katie Murdahl. She is a teenaged girl. She is the only child of a wealthy businessman and his socialite wife. They live in a 19th floor luxury condo on Chicago's Gold Coast overlooking Lake Michigan. Katie goes to a private school. She likes to read. She is something of an aspiring photographer and describes herself as an introvert, I guess. But that is all about to change when one morning Katie is called out of her class to be told that her father has been found dead in his Porsche, and apparently a suicide. And it also appears that he had been running a high finance investment swindle scheme for quite some time. And assets will be frozen and property may be confiscated, and it's just a nightmare, and their lives have been completely upended. And the story of Opulence is the story of the summer that follows this catastrophe. I'll set the stage for you a little bit as we go, and then when I do some readings, read you some excerpts, and then at the end we'll have some time for questions of anything you'd like to know about me or writing the story or about the book or anything else that comes to mind. So we'll start off here. Katie's father, Larry, has been found dead, and the police are asking questions. Financial records are being carried off and being analyzed. Her mother, Pam, is just distraught and furious and terrified. Katie is more or less numb. She just has no idea what's going to happen next. And then at the funeral service, she meets an aunt and uncle that she didn't know she had. So this is where we'll pick up the story. Mom was so angry after that. She didn't want a funeral. She didn't want a memorial service. She didn't even want to bury him. Just send the son of a bitch to the crematorium right from the morgue, she snarled. I asked if I should go back to school or something. Sure, fine, go right ahead. Go on back to your life. I'm so sorry you've been inconvenienced. And she slammed the bedroom door. I did not go back to school. I emailed the guidance counselor, and she emailed back. She was sorry for my loss and not to worry. The year was nearly over anyway, and we could talk later about makeup work. At private schools, they cut you more slack, considering the tuition that your parents pay them. Somehow, somebody organized a private funeral service just to get it over with. There was me, Mom, Daddy's secretary sobbing into the Kleenexes, a couple of other people from Mom's committees, and this old couple I'd never seen before. They sat on one of those hard brocade sofas at one side of the room. The man was very tall and lean, with a high bald head and fluffy gray eyebrows. The woman was short and chunky, with long gray hair pulled back in a ponytail. They sat there together, quietly, looking uncomfortable. They made me think of that painting in the Art Institute, that farmer with a pitchfork and the sad-looking woman with him. But these people, they looked like the unhappiness wasn't normal to them, like they were usually pleasant people, but being there had made them different. I'd seen them speak to my mother, who was very formal and just shook their hands briefly. Who are those people over there? I finally asked my mother. She sighed and said, come on. Katie, this is Maggie and Len Murdahl. This is Katie. Katie, Len is your father's brother, your Uncle Len and Aunt Maggie. She seemed to run out of anything else to say and turned away. I held out my hand, and the man stood up and took it in both his big bony ones. He looked at me for a long second and said, oh my goodness, Katie Murdahl, you do favor your father. He dropped my hand and dropped himself heavily back down onto the sofa. He turned his face away and scratched at his eye with his thumb. Maggie touched his arm. She stood up and hugged me. "We're so sorry," she said into my ear. I knew there was an older brother, like 15 years older, but he lived back in Kansas, and there were Christmas cards, and that was about it. I'd never met them. I didn't know anything more than that. "You probably don't remember," said Len slowly, "when your mom and dad brought you out to the farm." "They did? When?" "Oh, you were just a little thing, maybe 2 years old, just walking anyway. They were driving out to California to see your mom's people and stopped to see me. Do you remember it at all?" I shook my head. "Not a bit." "I remember your mom had you all dressed up in a little blue dress and sandal shoes, and I took you out to show you the chickens and the calves, and she was so worried you'd get that dress dirty. And you did, of course." He chuckled a little. "You sat down in the grass, and the chickens walked all around you, and you wanted to hug the calves and got slobber on you, and you didn't mind a bit." I'm sure I didn't care about getting the dress dirty. It was funny to think I'd liked the chickens and the calves, and it all sounded just like Mom. She probably wanted to show me off, and it just didn't occur to her that a little girl dress and sandals wouldn't be the best thing to dress a toddler in to visit a farm. "I wish I remembered it," I said. "Sounds like I liked it." "You didn't stay long," said Len, eyes on the carpet. "We just kind of fell away after that, I guess. Your dad wanted out of there from the time he was a boy. He had big plans, big ideas, and he wasn't going to get them in Opulence." "Opulence? Is that the town you lived in?" Len nodded. "Opulence, Kansas." "Do you still live on that farm?" "Do," he said. "Still live in the house my grandfather built." "It's a funny old house," said Maggie. "It was his property I coveted when I married him." Len smiled. He took Maggie's hand and held it. We sat there for a little bit. "I'm glad you came all this way," I said. "I'm glad to meet you." Mom was beckoning me from across the room. They both stood up. "If you ever want to come out to visit, you'd be more than welcome," Maggie said. "Take care of yourself and your mom." So that, in a way, is how I ended up getting off a plane at the Wichita airport, lugging shoulder bags with my laptop and my camera stuff. Len and Maggie were picking me up. They said they'd meet me at the baggage claim. "Which one?" I asked. Maggie laughed. "Don't worry, we'll find you." I live in Chicago, okay? Which means the airport I'm used to is O'Hare. 5 terminals, 150 gates, banks of screens and lists of planes and mobs of people all in a hurry, lines into the restroom, $6 coffee, and no place to sit. You have to look at more screens to figure out which baggage area your luggage will be at, hopefully, or you pay $1 to use a cart because it's like a mile to where your car is, if you can find it. So I get off in Wichita with a dozen people and walk out into this empty concourse. We stroll along past a couple fast food places, down some stairs, and there's the baggage claim. Just one. And there are Maggie and Len. And we wait maybe 5 minutes, and there's my suitcase. Maggie already had a cart. "I wasn't sure how much stuff you'd have," she said. We trundled out the door, across the drive, and there's the parking lot, just one, and a big red dusty crew cab pickup. Len set the suitcase in the back, and I climbed into the seat behind the driver. "You okay back there?" asked Maggie into the rearview mirror. "Len needs to shove his seat back so far he'd squish you." She was driving. "Sure, I'm fine," I said. It was kind of cozy, curled up behind her as the truck rumbled along. "Your flight was okay?" No problem." Silence. We passed a Kmart and Walgreens and tire dealers and demolition companies and liquor stores. It was flat, bright, sun ricocheting off windshields and chrome bumpers. I put on my sunglasses. "How's your mom doing?" "Getting along, I guess," I said. And I thought, what have I done? Why am I driving along in a pickup truck with 2 total strangers to go stay in their farmhouse in God knows where, Kansas? Didn't that whole in cold blood thing happen in Kansas? Why did this seem like a good idea? But I knew why. Anything to get out of that house, away from my furious, miserable, confused mother, who was only too glad to be rid of me so she could do or be or say whatever she had to in the wreckage. We're glad to have you, hon, said Maggie. I hope it's a good thing for both of you. How far is it to your house? I asked. 100 miles or so, said Len. Oh my God, I said. 100 miles to pick me up at the airport? Everything's farther apart out here, said Maggie. Her eyes in the mirror were smiling. From what I heard, it can take that long to get across town in Chicago. Well, that's true. Scissortail flycatcher, Maggie called out. Len smiled. You and your birds. Maggie pulled the truck over onto the shoulder. I craned around looking for the traffic to back up. There wasn't any. There, she said, pointing. A huge empty green field stretched away with barbed wire tacked to fence posts made out of tree branches. On the fence wire, there was a bird sitting, about the size of a robin maybe, with a really long tail. It's my favorite bird, she said. They have the most beautiful peach-colored breast, and when they fly, that tail opens and closes and swirls. It must be a good sign to see one when you've just come. She pulled the truck back onto the blacktop, and we rumbled off again. I sat back in the seat. Len and Maggie seemed to be people not bothered by silence. We just rolled quietly along, past emerald green expanses cut through with little creeks and streams lined with shaggy trees. I thought Kansas would be all gray and flat. Too much Wizard of Oz, I guess. But it wasn't, not here anyway. The land had a shape, sort of bones and muscles under the grass, sloping here and valleys there, red and gold clouds bunching and rising up in the distance. It's supposed to storm tonight, said Len. It's May in Kansas, said Maggie. I mean, I didn't expect exciting conversation, but it was, I don't know, restful in the back seat of the red truck, big, thick tires gripping the road, facing the towering clouds. You could see a long way out here from the ground. So, Katie is now settling in with Len and Maggie at their house. She meets their chickens. She's startled awake by a weather radio in the middle of the night announcing a thunderstorm. She drinks plain old Folgers coffee made in a stovetop percolator, and she likes it. She starts a series of photographs of the sunsets. And then she tags along to a Memorial Day church picnic. So, said Maggie, as she put away the skillet, how do you feel about going to church? My immediate, thoughtful, gracious response was to stare at the dish towel and go, it's okay, she said. You don't have to. I don't always go either, but Len likes to. And after the service, they're having a picnic for Memorial Day. I'd forgotten it was Memorial Day weekend and instantly felt terrible. I was out here chatting in the kitchen with Maggie while my mom was going to be languishing alone over my dad's ashes, but she probably wasn't. Oh, I'm so sorry, Maggie said. I didn't think. She stood nervously ringing at the dish rag. It's okay, I said. I forgot too. Now I feel bad. I shouldn't have forgotten. It's all just so weird. Part of me is glad when I forget, and then I feel guilty, and I can't help it, and I trailed off. Maggie wiped back a straggle of her hair. Well, anyway, she said the church is hosting this picnic with the social service in town for kids and families with problems, you know, battered women or kids with parents who died or are gone in the military. Just any family with kids could use some help. I don't know, would you want to come? Help out, meet some of the neighbors. Maybe if you didn't mind, maybe you could bring your camera and take some pictures. Just for the folks who will be there, they might like that. But really, it's fine if you don't want to, but you'd be absolutely welcome to come. Sure, I said, I'll come. I don't have any church clothes though. She laughed. The pastor will be in jeans under his robe, and God sure doesn't care. Well, why not? And if I took a few pictures of people and their kids, why not? I tagged after Maggie, who introduced me to the Kirchners and a bunch of other people. Many of them had the same last names, and I kind of lost track of who was who. They were all really nice and smiled at me and said they were glad to meet me. They didn't ask what grade I was in or how long I was staying, though everyone did manage to make some kind of a wry comment about how different this must be from Chicago. And every time I said, honestly, that yeah, it was different and in a good way. And that made them happy, and overall it was pretty easy. It was like people out here knew how to live with the space between them. In the city, there's so many people all in the same place that you storm along and grab your own space before anyone else can take it and act like there's no one else there. Out here, there was plenty of room for everybody, so you were actually glad to see each other and chat and have a friendly word. I was a total stranger. That was okay. I got out my camera and Maggie started lining people up and I took their pictures and they all just stood there smiling and it was no big deal. She knew who everybody was, so we'd sort through the shots later on. I took some candid party shots just for the heck of it and then went to find a bathroom. It was down a windowed hallway, and when I came around the corner, I saw this guy sitting on a bench. He didn't notice me. He looked about my age, maybe a little bit older, so maybe not so into the mom and kids theme that afternoon. He sat hunched forward, his elbows on his knees, intent on his cell phone. The sun emerged from the clouds and suddenly rim-lit him, outlined his shape, the curve of his back, the angles of his elbows and shins, the light on his forearms and the toes of his boots. I snapped off 3 shots and the sun disappeared. He still hadn't seen me. The bathroom was right opposite where he was sitting. When I got there, he glanced up and I said, "Hi," and went into the bathroom. And then I felt embarrassed because he could hear me flush the toilet. He said hi to me when I came out again. So what the heck? "Hi," I said again. "I'm Katie Murdaugh." "Oh, right. Len and Maggie's niece, right?" I guess word travels fast. "Yeah, nice to meet you." Silence. "Did you get, something to eat or anything?" I asked him. "Nah, no thanks. I just brought my little brother to this thing. My mom had to work, so I said I'd bring him." "Oh, which one is your brother?" "Oh, the fat little dude in camo pants." I knew who he'd meant. "He's Doug. I'm Travis Gibb." And then he turned his head. His hair was shaggy, just uncut long, not on purpose long, but not all over. The right side of his head was almost bald, just a feathery fuzz with a few strands off the top falling down. The skin was stiff, shiny, pink, creased, and he didn't really have a right ear, just a gnarly little rim around the ear hole. I felt a little sick, but I was damned if I'd let on. The pink, shiny skin sheath went down his neck, inside his collar, and his right hand was curled, contracted, 2 fingers were missing. He placed his hand by his thigh where I couldn't see it. "Burns," he said. "You haven't heard the Gibb house fire story yet?" I shook my head. "Your dad, I heard he died," he said. I nodded. "I'm sorry," he said. "So did mine." "In the fire?" This time he nodded. "Back in January." "But you and your other family are okay?" "Mom was working, thank God. I got Dougie out and he was fine. But my dad, he was done. Nothing to do for him." "My dad shot himself," I said abruptly. What, was this some kind of competition, like whose dad had the most gruesome death? "I heard that," he answered. I stood there twisting my camera strap while Travis Gibb sat there and looked up at me. "It'll get easier," he said. "Takes a while, though. Though maybe not so bad for me. My dad was a nasty piece of work." "Mine wasn't," I said. "Not to me." He stood up. "I better go find Dougie," he said. "See you around, I guess." "Maggie and Len are good people. They'll take good care of you." He walked away. So Katie and Travis have now met, and they start to get acquainted, not without some very awkward moments and some misunderstandings. They've gone out and had breakfast. Katie's actually met his mom. So at this point, he asks her out for breakfast again. And she has a watch, and the clasp on it is broken. So they're going to meet for breakfast, and then she needs to pick up her watch at the jewelry shop where they have gotten it fixed for her. When he asks her out, he says he wants to show her something cool and to bring her camera. So Len and Maggie drop her off at the diner on the way to a doctor's appointment. Travis's truck was in front of the diner already, and he was in the same booth. I had the skillet breakfast again, this time with bacon. We ate, I paid. It's only fair, right? Not even fair, but well, anyway. Come this way, Travis said. He turned away from his truck and around the corner. I followed him around to an alley that went back up the block behind the diner and the stores. He tugged open a back door and we were in a tiny vestibule. And off to the side, I could hear food sizzling and china clinking in rapid Spanish voices. Ginny's kitchen. Travis softly opened a peeling wooden door and motioned for me to follow. He groped for a switch and a bare bulb lit up enough to make our way down some wooden stairs into the cellar. There were boxes on shelves, extra kitchen stuff, canned goods, bales of paper towels and napkins, and a bare cement floor. A basement? I said. You want me to take pictures of the diner basement? But actually, the light kind of trickled through a tiny high window and made some shadows on the paper towel rolls, and I did take a couple of shots, some sort of moody film noir stuff, which might look interesting in black and white. No, this is the cool part, said Travis. He opened yet another door, and we stepped across into another basement space. Big, cavernous, dusty, but lit by a bigger fan-shaped window. Walls of huge chiseled blocks of stone with ancient mortar crumbling out between them. Along the wall, a heavy wooden, shelf unit with a counter in front, big, thick wood with niches and shelves, and a ledge for a cash register, even a foot rail, though it was bent and broken, a bar like in the old Westerns. One wooden stool in front of the bar and another one tipped over nearby. Oh my God, I breathed. This is amazing. How old is this? Maybe from cattle drive days. It was a speakeasy during Prohibition. These used to be the coal cellars in town, and then they put in gas lines, so they decided they'd use these tunnels for businesses. Look over here. He showed me a filthy alcove in the back corner with no window at all, with nothing in it but broken bricks, a lone broom worn down to nubs, and a rickety iron bedstead. Barroom girls did their entertaining in here, they say. I went behind the bar and started peering into the shelves and cupboards underneath. Careful where you put your hands, said Travis. Snakes come down here sometimes. Before he finished even saying the word snakes, I slammed shut a door and jumped back. But at the back of one shelf, just catching a glint of light, I spotted one tiny, dusty, crusty shot glass. It was stuck in the crackled varnish of the shelf, but with a tap it came loose. There was a dried brown ring in the bottom. Oh, look! I held it out to Travis. Look, some cowboy's last bit of whiskey maybe, still in the glass. I set it on the bar where the light would just touch it and took pictures, just the glass and the dust and a light. Travis murmured something. What? I asked. Oh, nothing, he said, looking away. Just an old song it made me think of. Whack, fold, a daddy-o, there's whiskey in the jar. At least I think that's what the words were. But the thing was his voice. It was deep and soft and very, very musical, I guess. I sat on the stool in front of the bar, cradling the shot glass. I pictured grubby cowboys, painted girls in flouncy skirts, then maybe thin bobbed girls in fringy sheath dresses and rolled down stockings. Travis picked up the other stool, tested it carefully, then slid himself onto it and laid his elbows on the bar. I looked at him sideways, waggled the glass at him and said, So, cowboy, how about you buy me a drink? He rapped his knuckles on the bar and drawled, Barkeep, a drink for the lady. Then he stood up, walked around the bar, and stood in front of me, straightening an imaginary bow tie. What'll it be, miss? He said. I held out the glass and tried for a sultry purr. Same again. Whiskey. Neat. He mimed, pouring into the glass. I tipped my head back, tossed it off, wrapped the black glass back down on the bar, and went, like they do in beer commercials. Travis leaned down with an elbow on the bar and muttered in a confidential way, Lady, if I was you, I wouldn't get mixed up with that one there. He jerked a thumb in the direction of the empty stool. Comes from bad stock. Never amount to nothing. Just saying, you can do better than the likes of him. My face felt hot. What the? But I carried on the game, whatever it was. Maybe I'll be the judge of that, mister, I sassed. Besides, I don't think he even likes me. Ha, said the barkeep. If he doesn't, he's crazy. We looked at each other till we both looked away. Maybe we should go, I said. We better go get your watch, he said. He waited in the truck while I went into the jewelry store. Here you go, said Marla, offering the watch straight over her fingers. It was a funny clasp, not what we usually see on these, but it should be working now. She fastened it on me. I shook out my wrist and it stayed put. I paid her $10. I got back in the truck and Travis drove me home. The big red truck was in the drive. Len and Maggie had beaten me back. Travis thanked me for breakfast. I thanked him for showing me the underground and told him I'd send him some pictures if they turned out okay. See you around, he said. Okay, I said. As I went through the gate into the yard, he called something out the truck window to me as he started to back out. I think he said, he does, you know. So I felt kind of shaky and springy when I walked into the house. Len and Maggie were sitting silently in the living room. Maggie was crying. So, you've met the main characters in Opulence of Katie and Travis and Len and Maggie, and they undergo some more trials in the course of the summer. Relationships wax and wane, and there are some discoveries made about some backgrounds that affect both their families. And Katie learns a lot about forming new bonds and different ways of relating to people, and we'll see where they go from there. And if you have any questions that you'd like to ask, I would be very happy to try to answer them.